Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. All right, is everybody ready, or should we wait a little bit for some more remote learners?
I think we're all here.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, hi everybody. How are you? Good. All right, so today we are going to talk about coil pottery. And everybody gets to make some. So we'll get to making the pottery shortly. There's a couple of things I wanted to go over with you real quickly first. And I will be respectful of time too. So before we get into pottery, I think I want to start with a video and then talk about potsherds real quickly, if that's okay with you, Mrs. Aubin. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen with you and show you this YouTube video, and it is shot in Acoma, New Mexico. So Acoma is one of the pueblos, and it is about a potter explaining not only how he makes pottery, but what it means to his family and some of the history of it, and how it's important to his culture, which is why I really like this video. It's been kind of one of the pluses of home and remote learning is we can use people who actually make the pottery to help us explain it. So I'll start that, and hopefully they won't play too many ads during it. I'll try to skip them, and then we'll come back here and we'll work on making our own. I am going to tell you today we're making coil pottery. And yours will be about this size because we just have a little bit of clay, right? The reason I use this piece is because you can really kind of see these little coils. And now normally when we make coil pottery, we want to smear those coils or scrape them so we can't see them so well. But when you watch this video, you'll notice the man uses really big, they're not even really coils, they're like sheets of clay. So that's going to be a little different from the way we do it. But that's an important thing to me too, is we talk about culture. Even people who live in the same place, who do the same thing, who maybe have similar personal histories, might do something really differently. So culture is full of variation, which I do love. So I'm going to show you this, and then we'll come back here and make some pots. All right, let's see. Here we go. Yes, do that. Why is it not liking me? There we go. Okay. Do you see that?
It's amazing what comes from clay.
Holding on to Mother Earth is what you want. Keeping the tradition alive and making pottery, I mean, that's what we were brought up from. Our ancestors were the ones that started making pottery. It was passed down from generation to generation, you know. My ancestors used to make cups themselves, pitchers, water olas, you know, just to carry, you know, drinking water. You're getting it from the spring. What it does is it purifies it, and it makes it taste like when it snows or when it rains and you smell that aroma. I have to get it like a powder form. I guess it does really take some part of you, of your heart and soul when you make a pot. When I'm making a new pot, you know, I think about my parents, my mother. Sometimes when you get the clay, you know, I tell myself, I say, oh, please, mother, you know, help me make a new pot. You know, make me work as fast as I can. You know, you're always asking for that prayer for, you know, help and guidance. I actually learned from some of the elders that used to live up here. When I was growing up here on Acma, the village of Sky City, I would go and watch them actually make pottery. I came back and asked my mother, can you show me how to make pottery? So my mother and my father were the ones that, really inspired me and said, okay, we'll show you how to do potteries. She really told us, Mother Earth is here, to show you. Well, I think the clay has its mind of its own, Sometimes we coil the pottery up, and then sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate with us. Sometimes it'll have cracks along the side. Sometimes the pot won't stay up and it'll just cave in. Some of the times when that happens, we always think back, what did I do wrong? Did I add enough pottery shards? Did I add enough water, or did I add too much water? Sometimes I have pots that will cave in, but it doesn't stop me there. What always drags me back is the way the clay feels. Mixing paint, grinding clay. When my aunt on the Chino side, Marie, they say, you have a talent, just keep going, never stop, don't give up. Some of the designs stay in the families. You say like the Kiva step designs, black and white. Mostly black and white were done, by my grandma Marie Chino, and then she started adding, a little bit of orange, and then most of the time it was clouds, the sun, Mother Earth, which is the whole pottery itself. We all here on Acma pray for rain. Yeah, this is the old style design. It's a rainbow, and then the insides are cornfields. Anything that has squares are cornfields. This is considered as a rainbow. So after it rains, then it shines over the cornfields. And it's just like saying, let me write a letter. I'm gonna draw a painting on my pottery. So that's my letter to Mother Earth or to the clouds to bring rain here. A lot of it is mainly a journey to life, like Tularosa designs. The reason why they did a Tularosa is when they started migrating from pueblo to pueblo, from trying to find a house. When I sell pottery, my pottery is actually migrating, different places. My pottery is probably overseas by now. My girls are going to be the ones to carry on the tradition of me making pottery, of how my mother taught me, of how I actually went to go see my aunts, my grandmas make pottery. Those are stuff that inspire you to keep going, to keep moving your tradition. I inspire my girls by making painting, telling them, what the design really means, what the pottery they make really means, So if they do get inspired and then we pass it on, then I'm actually doing my job by passing on the tradition. it's really quite amazing, you know, what comes out of a piece of clay, a piece of rock. I see peacefulness. Because when you come up here to Acoma, it is peaceful. It's quiet. And when you look at pottery, you say like, boy, I see peacefulness in this pottery. It's a gift, peaceful gift. So
All right. Oop, yeah. Uh-oh. Let me close this down. There we go. All right. Now I have you guys again. Okay. So I will take 3 questions or comments, and then I have 3 things to mention to you guys. Does anyone have something that really jumped out as notable?
Unmuted. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna do it. Sorry. Right. Sorry, we're switching jobs here. So Jensen, do you have a question?
Yeah.
I wonder how they like color the pot.
Okay, so you saw him painting, right? So a lot of times those paints are made from plants and minerals. And you notice he was using a really traditional way of making his pottery. So there's a plant called bee plant that's really good for making black paint. There are sometimes minerals that, especially if they have a lot of iron in them, those will make for good paints. So yeah, there are special plants and minerals that they use, and those were really typical Pueblo, especially Acoma colors that you saw. I realize my light's not very good, but it doesn't really matter. So yeah, great observation. 2 more questions or comments?
All right, Miss Abby.
How did he paint them like
I'll repeat it.
how did he paint them like how much how did he paint them
So she's asking how he painted with such detail and how he managed to paint it.
Okay. Did you see his really tiny brush that he was using?
Yeah.
So he did something that I haven't seen everyone do. He kind of drew his designs with like a pencil or something ahead of time. Some people just freehand it. But one of the really common kind of brushes is to use part of a yucca leaf. So this is one that I kind of split on the end, but as you can see, it's got a lot of little fibers. So it's not uncommon to take just a couple of little tiny fibers of yucca leaf and use that as a brush. Some people will use a little bit of hair or even a hair. I don't think it's a Pueblo tradition, but I have had kids here at the museum use a pine needle as a really fine paintbrush, and that actually worked pretty well with like acrylic paints. So yeah, the designs are they're really fine, right? They're really intricate. Great observation. All right, one more. Ben, are you awake, sir? Did you take a nap? Hi. We're gonna make class in a second. Okay, one more question or comment.
All right. Let's see, Logan.
how much clay do they need to make a pot?
So he's asking how much clay does he need to make a pot?
Well, kind of depends on the size of the pot, right? So sometimes we make really big pots, we need a lot of clay. Today we're going to be making really small pots, so we don't need very much clay. You'll notice though, he starts from going and finding raw clay in the environment and drying it, and then you saw him grinding it and sifting it to get all the impurities out. And then he has to mix in what's called a temper. And temper is something a little bit more gritty than the clay that keeps helps it dry uniformly so that your clay pot doesn't explode when you fire it. So I will talk a little bit about temper if I answered your question. Kind of. So it depends on the size of the pot. Usually potters will go get a lot of clay and then they've got clay for lots of pots, and they'll make like a batch. Kind of like when you make cookies. You don't make cookie dough for one cookie, right? You make it like a few dozen. Well, I eat most of it, but Jensen, did you have one more thing you needed to say?
Where do we get the clay?
Oh, you know what? Mrs. Aubin has it. So we can start handing some of that out in a moment. I do want to show you. So you mentioned temper. Oh, good job. Oh, actually, Jensen, did you have a bag picked up at school at all? The bag has your tools for today. Sorry, I should have thought of that. You're at home. No, it was like if you've gone to the drive-in at the library to get your books, I reused a whole bunch of those paper bags with little handles on them. If not, do you have, yeah, like Haley's got, did you get something like that? No. Do you have any Play-Doh at home? No. Do you have anything you can use to make like Play-Doh? All right, what I'm gonna have you do, Jensen, is you can watch and then you can make your pot later, okay? Because it's a pretty, once you get the idea, it's a pretty.
Yes, so Jensen, you can have mom, when she's out next, maybe pick up your bag and then, do it later for sure.
It's there, yeah. And you can always ask me for questions if you have questions. Okay, so real quickly, the potter talked about temper and pot shards, although archaeologists called them sherds. It's a thing. So I do want to talk real quickly about pot sherds. If you were here, I would hand them around. So if you see, this one looks really ridgy, right? And that's because the coils weren't smoothed out all the way on the outside of the pot. On the inside, it's pretty smooth. But on the outside, we've got these ridges. And that's called corrugated pottery. If you touch it, you can feel those ridges, kind of like corrugated cardboard. And this, you'll notice it's not really decorated. It's kind of plain. I should be better at my framing. So this is great pottery for things like cooking or storage. It can heat up and cool down and not break as easily. So when we find potsherds like this, we know that they were probably used as kind of utility vessels. Whereas, and I'm going way back to old potsherds, but when we see pretty ones that are smoothed and decorated like these are more for other purposes like serving or just for using as art forms, which a lot of those ones we saw in the video were for. So this is painted pottery and it has similar designs. Some of these designs go back over 1,000 years to the ancestors of the Pueblo people. So if you find these potsherds, kind of like our lithics, our stone pieces we talked about, it's really important to take pictures and leave them where they are because they belong with the story of the place. The ones I have here at Hiwan were given to us by a Hopi potter specifically for our education program. So that's why we have them here. But when I find them in special places in the desert, I always leave them where they are. Okay, so if you are at home or in the classroom, you have a few things for our pot making. There, you should have a ball of clay. You can have a cup and put just a little tiny bit of water in it. It's really just enough to dip your fingers in. In case your clay starts cracking and getting dry, you might want 2 fingers in water to help moisten it up a little bit. And then you also have, I don't have mine, but you have a little.
Voices are off. Sorry, we're in the process of. Can you hold on? Thank you. Sorry, we're passing the things out and they got a little excited.
Oh, good. Well, do your thing. I'll talk to the remote learners. You have a cupcake liner. That's for putting under your pot while you're making it so it doesn't get attached to your desk. So it's easier to pick up. And then you also have a toothpick. We're going to save the toothpick for the end so you can set that aside for a moment. And I am going to reframe my shot here so you can see my.
I don't think that's
Oh, water. Oh,
So remote learners, anyone?
literally.
There we go.
All right.
All right, so if everyone has their clay, we're gonna start by warming up our clay ball. So I'm gonna just squish it in my hands to warm it up and make it kind of more malleable so that we can move it more. And I wanna mention another thing that our potter said in the video, which is, I don't remember exactly how he put it, but it's a common thought, which is the clay, you never know what the clay is going to want to do. Sometimes you have to let the clay decide. So you might already have in mind the shape of your pot, but your clay might have a different idea. So I encourage you to go with the artistic experience and kind of see what happens. And also remember, it takes a lot of practice. Does anybody know when that man started learning pottery? And who taught him? It was his grandma, right? And his aunt and his mom. And he started learning when he was little. So I've been doing these clay pots here for, gosh, I think about 10 years now. And mine don't turn out the way I want them either sometimes. So it's okay. You can, this is air dry clay. You can always re-moisten it and try again. All right, so if your clay is feeling warm, we're going to break off a little bit of it. Not half, maybe about a fourth of it. And roll that piece into a ball. And then we're going to squash that ball kind of flat in our hands. So it kind of looks like a thick pancake. And this will be the bottom of our pot. You saw that, and I can't remember his name all of a sudden, but the man we were watching, he used a bowl to start his pot, right? Because he had a really big one and he uses really big pieces of clay. Sometimes people will use an old pot bottom or a bowl or something to start their pot, because then they can turn it more easily to work on it. And I bring that up because it's actually one of my favorite words. If you use something like that, it's called a pookie, P-U-K-I, which is just a fun word. So pookie. In our case, you're going to make your base, and then you could either put it right on your surface, or that's why I gave you a little cupcake holder too. You can put it, kind of flatten that out and put it on there, because sometimes our pot bottoms stick to the table. Kind of wish I had something darker. Okay, so there's our bottom. There are a few different ways to make the bottom, but that's how we're going to do it today. And to make our pots, we're going to use a technique called coil and scrape. So we put on a coil, and then we're going to scrape it smooth. So break off another small piece of clay from your ball. You're going to make that into a coil, which is kind of like a little snake. So I like to start it in my hands and then use my desk or table or a surface to make it a little longer and thinner. And try to make sure it's all about the same when you're done. Yeah, nice. And you know what? It's okay if it breaks in half. I was thinking I might actually break mine in half on purpose. So I can put it around the bottom of my pot. So once you have the coil made, you want to put it right along the base of your pot. I'm going to get mine quite tight enough. And then as we do each coil, we're going to use our fingers, although sometimes potters will use a tool. And we're going to smear that clay between the layers so that we can't see the line anymore. And this bottom coil is really important because if you don't get it attached very well, you end up with a pot that has no bottom. Now, if you're finding that your clay is cracking and getting really dry as you're doing this, that's when you want to take just 1 or 2 fingers in your water to help you moisten it up. If you use too much water, your pot will collapse. So try to use just a little bit. And we really want to move that clay between the coil and the base so that it's smooth. Well, a lot of potters also smooth the inside as they're going. You can do that too. It will just make your pot stronger. So I have my first coil smoothed on. Now I'm going to add my second coil. And if you want your pot to gradually get a little bit bigger, a little wider, you're going to put each coil a little bit on the outside of the one below it. And if you want it to come in towards the top so that the opening is smaller than the bottom, then you're going to gradually put each coil a little bit on the inside of the coil below it. If you do a little bit of both, go outside and inside, you get a little bit more of sort of the shape of pot that we saw being made in the video. But you can make lots of different shapes depending on what you want to do with your coils. Mine usually end up looking pretty much like a cylinder. So I guess that's what the clay wants for me. So add a coil and then smear it on.
I'm actually not bad. I'm not bad on this. Okay, all right, keep working.
If anybody has questions as we're going, feel free to ask.
Anybody have any questions for her? Abby? She would like to know how many coils you think that we'll be working on. How many?
I don't know. I think I can probably get probably 8 or so out of my clay ball. I might have grabbed a little bit bigger one today for myself here. But it also depends on how big around you make your pot. Because if it has to go farther around, then it won't go as tall, right? And you don't have to use all of your clay if you don't want to. That's up to you. If you want to, among our many shapes of pottery, there is a place at Mesa Verde where they found mugs, and mugs are a common shape of pottery as well. So if you're feeling like you have extra clay and you're making a cylinder pot like mine tend to be, and you want to add, there's my coffee cup, a handle, you can also do that. Or you could make it like a basket, or you could put some clay decoration on the outside or something like that.
All right, so right now we're just focusing on our.
I have a question.
Okay, Haley, what's your question?
Do we get to paint these?
Oh, who is asking? Let's see.
That was Haley.
Oh, it was Haley. Do you get to paint them? So yes, this is air dry clay. So it does not have to be fired. If you give it, I think the package says 2 to 3 days to dry. Probably it will dry faster here in Colorado, but I would wait a couple of days. And then if you want to paint them with acrylic paints, that usually works pretty well. And you could even go out and find like a pine needle or maybe a blade of grass or something like that, and try using a more traditional brush too.
Okay.
But yeah, wait till it's dry all the way first. And remember, you guys, this is air dry clay. So if you tried to put liquid in it, it will become wet again and it won't be a pot anymore. So if you want to use it to hold something, maybe not liquids.
Okay. All right. Madison also has a question for you, Madison.
Okay.
She would like to know if you can use watercolors to decorate it.
You know, I feel like watercolors might be so watery that they might kind of make your clay wet again, but it would be worth a try. I don't know. I've never tried using watercolors on it.
My cup is being baffled. She's got a babysit and I get paid with her. I don't like mine.
Look at you, all done.
Are people finishing with their clay?
Oh, We have some, about a third finished or so.
Okay, let's take a little pause and I'll show them what they can do next.
All right, ready to rock? Eyes up here.
All right, so I know some of you are still adding coils. That's fine. When you're done adding coils, that's when you can use your toothpick. Something to make sure you do is put your name or initials or a special design that says that that's your pot on the bottom, because most potters today sign their artwork because it is art and not just something their family uses or their friends use. So put your initials on the bottom of your pot, or if there's a special design that really you like. And then if you want to use the toothpick to create etched designs in your pot, you can. You can see this one, somebody put sort of zigzags in. And then when it was painted, they stood out a little bit more because the paint didn't sink in. I think that's my only etched one I have, but you could put whatever kind of geometric or other designs you'd like on the side. So for Pueblo potters, a lot of geometric designs, you know, we get sort of the stair steps. You saw that man using squares inside of circles to show cornfields. You see a lot of animals used on Pueblo pottery. So you can think about what kind of designs you might want, unless you plan on painting those designs on. So that's something you can do with your toothpick too. And we'll work for maybe 5 more minutes, and then I'll take some final questions and comments. Oh, Ben, that is beautiful. I love it.
Nice job, Ben. All right, Charlie's got working hard. Does anybody have any more questions for her about pottery in general, or yours that you're working on? Astria. Ah, she said, why is it so hard?
I know, right? Well, it's an art form, and the only way to get better at just about anything is to practice, right? So it's probably hard because it's one of the first time that we've made coil pots. If you've ever made a pinch pot, you know that it's much easier to make, but the way that the clay gets structured in a pinch pot isn't as strong. So people who made coil pottery were kind of planning on using it longer, maybe than a pinch pot's a bit more like a temporary vessel. So that's part of why it's so hard, because you want it to last longer, and it's an art form, and it's the first time we did it. So if you did this every day or every week, you would get better and better, just like playing piano or playing basketball or anything else, right?
Very much so. All right, Miss Abby, did you have another question?
How do they make the brushes? Like, when they do it with hair, how do they make it?
She asked how they made the brushes with, if they made it with hair, how they would make those.
Probably either, I'm not sure.
Pen?
Horsehair is used a lot by potters, so I don't know if they use horsehair or if they use their own hair, but I'm sure that they just cut it off. The yucca brushes, I've read, are made by chewing on the end of the yucca leaf. So being sort of an amateur anthropologist, I tried that, and I will tell you it does not taste good, and I don't really recommend it. But yeah, probably just using a couple of their own hair, a little bit of their own hair, and then twisting it together, or using horsehair would probably be the most common.
Miss Abby, did you have a question?
How do they use the pot?
She was, how did they use the pots, or how do you use the pots?
How do you
What were some of the uses of the pots? And she was wondering, how do we use ours?
Yeah. Well, so common uses of pots in history are, like I said, that corrugated pottery is often used for cooking, over, especially on fires, or you can put hot rocks in things, of course, like we talked about last week, for serving. So even today you can buy, like, your coffee cup that looks like a coil pot. I doubt that one's made the same way. For in history, we see pottery used for food storage. So we'll talk a little bit more about food storage maybe next time, but it's a really good way to store food or water, right? Because it will keep out insects and rodents and keep things kind of fresh if you keep it in a cool place. Also for eating and serving things, there are special jars called seed pots. I mean, this is one of our Hiwan pots, so it's not like a real Pueblo pot, but they kind of look like this with a wide base, and they have a really small hole in the top. And I actually was just watching another pottery video last week that the reason those are so small is because they'll hold the seeds, and then when you're planting, they won't all pour out at the same time because the hole's so small, which is something I just learned. And then kind of in the last 100 years or so, a little bit before, we start seeing pottery sold strictly as art. So just as fine arts, first to tourists, and now to people who sort of appreciate Pueblo arts and things like that. So there are a lot of different uses now. Like I said, you probably shouldn't use yours for liquid because it's made out of air dry clay. But you could use it, you could give it to your mom for Mother's Day, and she could put little treasures in it. I get a lot of little treasures from my son, maybe to hold rings or earrings or necklaces, things like that. You could use it to hold all your little cap erasers or something at your desk at home. Just kind of any little thing you want to hold. Things like that. You could probably put dry food in it. I mean, it's non-toxic clay, so you could probably use it as like a tiny little snack bowl if you wanted. But yeah, so those are some ideas. Or you could just put it on a shelf at your house as art that you made. We have a couple at my house that my son has made. So those are some ideas.
Excellent. Max, you have a question?
Can that air pot, whatever this is, at my house, can I make pots there?
So Max said if he has air dried clay at his house, could he make pots like this at his house?
You sure can. Yeah, I just use the regular old Crayola air dry clay for this. So you don't have to go getting the temper and do all the prep. You can make, it's up to your parents, but as far as I'm concerned, you can make as many coil pots in this. And if you have a lot, you could make a bigger one too, right? You could make a bigger container. Great idea.
Excellent. Lucas, do you have a question? He's having trouble having it stuck to the table. He's trying to figure that out.
Try to peel it up really carefully. You might have to kind of patch the bottom a little bit.
Oh, you do that toothpick. Yeah, that's a rough one. Any other questions? All right. I don't know how much time. Yeah, I know that your time is valuable too.
It's up to you. I'm available if you guys want to move on to. That's fine. I can talk a little bit about the steps after coiling. If you
Oh, perfect. All right. Let me get them back. They're excited. Hold on.
and if they're working, that's even better. You know.
They are. Well, you know. All right. Hocus pocus. So as you're finishing up, you're listening here as you're working. We do need to wrap it up in the next couple minutes, friends. We have our next we have specials. But go ahead and finish up while she's giving our last little bit.
All right, a very quick review. If we were working with regular clay, like our potter in the video, if you can see this sign behind me, there are a lot of steps left if we were doing like real Pueblo pottery. So after we get this all shaped and scraped, we would let it dry in the sun or by a warm oven, which we'll do. We'll let our clay dry because it's air dry. But it kind of would become mostly hard, but not fired hard. And then we would want to sand it to get all those extra little bits off the outside, which we can do with our fingers on our air dry clay. Then we would put on a slip. And a slip is sort of like a watery clay that kind of works like a paint. So if you can see up in that top middle picture up there, there's someone putting that layer of slip on the clay, and usually it's a different color than the clay we use to make the pot. Then that slip has to be polished. You saw that man in the video using a rock, right, to polish his pot. That's what he was doing. And sometimes these polishing stones are handed down in families, so that might have been his great grandma's polishing stone that he was using to polish his pot. So there's always a connection to the generations before and then the generations to come. You heard him talk about how he hoped that his kids learned pottery and continued the tradition. After it's polished, then that's when potters will etch those designs. That's when they'll use tools to carve in and make those designs. And then paint it we've talked a lot about painting. And then you have to fire the pot. And to fire it, you put the pots usually on the ground. They don't use a kiln in Pueblo pottery typically. And build a fire around it and then put metal around that fire to kind of hold it in. And that is a really critical time in pottery, because if there was air in your clay, an air bubble, and you fire it, it might just explode the whole pot. And so after all that work of making it, you might lose the pottery. But you can always use those sherds. You can grind them up to make temper for the next batch of pots. So most potters I've heard are pretty philosophical about pots exploding in the fire. They figured that one just wasn't meant to be, or they weren't focused when they were making their pottery. Their mind wasn't in the right place, so it didn't work out. So, all right. Any other questions or comments for me before I say goodbye for today?
You're ready to wrap it up.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, remote learners and people in the classroom. I can't wait to see your pots. I hope maybe somebody will take a picture and send it.
Oh, definitely. Okay.
Did you finish yours? Did you make one? Can I see it? Leo? No. Oh, look at your cool mug. That turned out great. Jensen, you were doing some cool stuff with sand, which is a really great substitute because we're talking about the desert. So, oh, and Haley's is nice too. And I saw Ben. All right. Well, you guys have a wonderful rest of the day. I will see you Thursday and we'll talk about weaving a
Bye.
Perfect. Thank you.
We'll see you Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, everybody. We'll see you guys at 2:45 for math. And my remote students, there's an assignment at 12:45 on Google Classroom. This one's yours.
Okay, bye.
All right. So there is an assignment on Google Classroom for 12:45, but there's no Zoom, okay? No Zoom, but an assignment. All right, bye, my friends.